Oh, okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Linda Hines to be Pennington tomorrow at 11 in the morning. And I'm the reason y'all are here. Because I fell madly in love with Robert Pennington. And just knew the man I wanted to marry. And so we've just created a lot of real special things, and we're so grateful to y'all for being here and sharing this experience with us. And I'd like to introduce Robert Pennington.
Lucky man.
I just want to share something a little bit about our story, because really you being here tonight is a part of that. About 6 months ago, after about a year of Linda being real clear about us getting married and me kind of choking every time the
Getting nauseous.
subject came up, finally she said, well, what is it going to take for you to set a date? And I said, a divine sign.
So the divinity created one.
Right? And I said, I don't know what that would be. And she said, well, how about October 16th? And I went, October 16th? October 16th. And so I had a little celestial guide for any of you who are interested in astrology, and so I thought, well, I'll see what October 16th is. And it's amazing what tomorrow is. Libra, which is a sign of balance, is both the sun and the moon. Both the sun and the moon are in Libra tomorrow. And that means that there's an emphasis on balance and teamwork. It even specifically said, start a marriage. And the moon, the planet that's most associated with that sign of Libra is Venus. And the moon is in a conjunction with Venus, which makes Venus exalted or more influential, and makes therefore the forces of Libra more influential. And it said, have a party. And then, on the little part of the calendar which it says what the holidays are, the little red there. The holiday was Sweetest Day. So tomorrow is Sweetest Day. And it's also a new moon, which is a time to begin things. And numerologically, it's a number 1, which is a time to begin things. So I was stunned. I was kind of hoping maybe there might not be one, divine sign, so clear. It says what it says. If it just said Rob and Linda will be married on that day, it's the only thing that could have been more clear.
I knew it all along.
So we knew we were going to be married. So then we decided how we wanted to do that, and we really were aware that what we wanted is to have Paul Solomon come and share that with us and officiate at it. And it's nice to, whenever he's around, to also let him share as much as possible with as many as possible. And so we thought about what to have him talk about, since we were kind of having something to do with that. And so this is the title that came up, Relationship, Sex, and Marriage. We figured that everybody was interested in at least one of those. And we have some questions about at least one of them. So we were real pleased with that. And when we told Paul about it, he said, wonderful, love to do it, like to do the wedding, terrific, love to do the talk, perfect topic. Let's see if at the end of the talk you still want to get married. So, we'll have to see. So I'm going to do something else, and I'll give you that. Many of us have gone to many lectures and many workshops. We've got many ideas, and we just kind of really enjoy those ideas while we're hearing them. And then we kind of say, boy, if I ever need that, now I know where it is. I just put it in my file, labeled stress or relationships or whatever. And that's, for most of us, that's what we tend to do with the things that come to us that we believe are true. We just kind of set them aside for a while. One of the nice things to find is a person who didn't do that. Who, when they found something that was true, they immediately went and did something with it. And that's what Paul has done. And as a result, thousands and thousands of people all over the planet have been touched and have had their lives enhanced. And because of an individual's dedication. And I think what you need to know is that Paul began no different from you. That any one of you at any time can begin doing that, and the result will be change in the planet. That's really what we're here to do. And so what I'd like you to do is just feel real grateful for the opportunity to be reminded of your own magnificence, and welcome Paul Solomon.
Now, once I erase that, I can talk on anything I want to. But it's not up there anymore. I think that our relationships are probably the single most important factor in our lives. They make an enormous amount of difference in whether we are happy or not, whether we're productive, effective, healthy. And when I speak of relationships, I want to speak of relationships with your source, with God, with yourself, and with others. And of course there is that one very important relationship for all of us, a life partner, someone to be with and to share with. It's sort of expected in our culture that we get married. If you don't, people wonder and suspect that there's something sort of strange about it. But there are other reasons for getting married as well. There's something that we seem to be born with that causes us to feel sort of not quite complete until we form some kind of a bonded relationship with a partner in life. It doesn't always work for everybody. In fact, it's very possible that some people are really not meant to have a life partner. And I think a lot of people who do have life partners wonder if they're one of those. And that's one of the things that I think I'd like to try and help clarify tonight, if we can, or come as close to giving guidelines and steps and markers along the way as we can possibly discover. Because you and I live in a really amazing society. It's an exciting place with all of the adventure, the possibilities, the speed at which we are living life in our time, and all the things that we can do in that life, some of them very threatening, some of them very satisfying, some exciting, some very frightening, some dangerous. But there's this whole smorgasbord. There are all these opportunities to go in either of these directions, good or bad. And that in itself produces all sorts of exciting possibilities. The most amazing thing, perhaps, about the whole culture is that it's irrational. You and I grew up, I'm convinced, in an irrational society. In a society, a whole world of people who are passing on irrational beliefs, practices, prejudices, and habits to a new generation. Beliefs that, for the most part, were passed on to us, some that we will create and that we will pass on to the next generation, almost designed, it seems, to make sure that the next generation will have as hard a time as we did. Getting along with each other, getting along with themselves, making some sense out of life. And the most fascinating thing about that is that we are people who have something called common sense, a reasoning ability. And that reasoning ability is perfectly capable of taking a look at most of these beliefs and habits and prejudices that we practice in relationships. We are capable of taking just the slightest look at them and discovering for ourselves that they are, in fact, irrational. They don't work. Many of them work against our own best interests. And the practice of them is so universal that the rarest thing in the world is to find somebody who is not sabotaging himself or herself in relationships. That is a very rare kind of being. And very often we don't know it, because one of our irrational practices in this culture is the practice of externalizing responsibility. We don't like to know, or especially to admit, that we are doing something that is not working for us. If it is working against my interest, then what I really want to do is find out who's to blame. And I make an assumption at the very beginning that whoever it isn't me. I am being victimized. If he would do this, or if she would act that way, our relationship would work, of course. I mean, it's always the other partner, isn't it? And when we begin to look at our input, and our beliefs, and our practices, it is very difficult for most of us to discover the irrationality of the belief and the practice that we are putting into motion, and how easy it would be, really, to change it. I think that sharing with you in a single evening like this is pretty ambitious. To even give that the slightest glimpse of these three subjects in 2 or 3 hours is very demanding. And the only reason that I'm willing to even attempt that is because I'm utterly convinced that the things that we need to deal with in relationships and sex and marriage are so elementary and so simple and so straightforward that it takes only a little look to get a whole lot clearer about what we're doing and how to make it work. If it were as complex as it seems to be initially, I wouldn't attempt this. But I think it isn't. I think there are some very simple, practical keys to making any relationship work, to having a joyous, fulfilling love relationship and sexual experience for most people. And if we can discover those simple keys, then perhaps we can cause a revolution, at least within ourselves, and maybe spread that to society as a whole. One of the interesting things about practices and habits in emotions and relationships is that they're a lot like a disease in this sense. Many diseases are contagious. If you're in the presence of someone suffering from that disease, you're exposed to it, and if you're vulnerable, you catch the disease, and sometimes very quickly. The thing that is not too well recognized, I think, is that the single most contagious disease in all the world is anger. Have you noticed that? You can catch it that quick. When somebody has anger in your presence, they are demonstrating a symptom. They have a dis-ease. And when you encounter them, you may not have that disease. But it only takes you a moment to notice the symptom they're putting out. And our belief is that the most appropriate thing to do in the presence of someone who is being angry, especially if that is directed toward me, the most appropriate thing to do is get angry right back. And it's a matter of pride that I get angry enough to overwhelm their anger and impose mine on them before they impose theirs on me. It's contagious. We can catch it so quick that we're not even aware that we caught the disease. We think, well, I'm defending myself. I'm standing up for my own rights. And if I have pride, then I will do that. I'm obligated to do that. Interesting thing is, it's irrational. It's particularly irrational because being angry and being hurt, being filled with wrath, is not a pleasant experience. I mean, I don't think there's a single one of us who would say, I really enjoy losing my temper and being totally angry. It's not a joyous, pleasant experience. And yet we decide to do that, and we make that choice rather than being joyous just because somebody else thought of it first. If you get angry and direct your anger toward me, then I will get just as angry just to prove that I can, even though it doesn't feel good, it isn't effective in producing a good result in our relationship. It doesn't work. And it poisons my physical body and ruins my health. 3 incredibly good, sensible, sound reasons not to do it. And I bet you can't find one good reason to do it. That makes it irrational to do it if it can be avoided. The interesting thing is, it can. It can be avoided by discovering that there is a better way to respond to another person's emotional situation, to what they're putting out. There's a better way to respond to dis-ease. One of the things that I should notice is that a person who is out of control and who is being miserable, depressed, hurt, angry, jealous, afraid, or any other negative emotion, a person who is exhibiting that emotion is exhibiting a symptom of dis-ease, lack of ease, lack of peace, lack of joy, lack of fulfillment in that moment. And the thing that I should do when I encounter it is recognize it for what it is, disease. And I should respond to it in a similar fashion to responding to any other contagious disease, which doesn't necessarily mean that the most appropriate thing to do is get the hell out of there. What it means is, if I recognize someone with a dis-ease and I care, I want to treat that disease. And it's more appropriate to treat it, to help it, than to catch it and become a patient as well. And if I recognize that almost without exception, I would be surprised if you could find an exception, when a person lashes out at you with anger, calling you names, stomping their feet, and saying all of the things that they know you're most vulnerable to. You know, that's another one of our irrationalities. Just a little aside here. Do you realize that one of the first things that we do in relationships is inform our other partner where all our buttons are? It's one of the first things you do in relationships. I bet you did it. Have you in your marriage told your husband or wife or children or lover, have you told that other person, you know that bothers me? You know that that's one of the things I just can't stand. I hate that word. Don't you ever use it. You know what you just did? You have just communicated a message to that person that says, anytime you desperately want to get my attention focused sharply, this is the word to use. It will be very effective. It will get my attention. So I've just located all my buttons. I've showed you exactly which ones to push. Anytime you are frustrated and want to share your frustration, this is the one for this, and this is the one for that. You know, you probably also told your partner just which people threaten you the most. And if they really want to make you jealous, they know exactly which one to go to, and that person might not have appealed to them if you hadn't suggested it. See how we started off with our own best interests? We set ourselves up. And it's amazing how much we do it. If I encounter someone with a symptom, they are lashing out at me, calling me names, stomping their feet, and so on. The single most important thing for me to know is I am not the target. I am not the target of their anger. Never mind the fact that they said that I am. I'm not. Maybe they don't know it, but if I'm smart, I will know it. I am not the target of that anger. The fact is, when a person is lashing out in anger, hurt, jealousy, fear, or whatever the negative emotion is, they are experiencing pain. And there are no exceptions. That person is experiencing pain. And that pain is the target. What they are communicating to me is the fact that they are hurting. And the more vicious they get with their assault, the more desperate they are to get me to recognize the depth of their pain. Now that does not mean that they hate me, even if they say so. What it means is that they recognize me as someone who can do something about it. Now, how appropriate is it for me to punish them? Think about it. Am I right? Did you think about it? You're not the most communicative here, I see. Well, we'll have you talking before the night's out. These are just some of the irrationalities that are an inherent part of the way that we are functioning commonly in this culture. These are accepted beliefs and practices. Accepted beliefs say you must stand up for your rights. When somebody is being angry with you, it is appropriate to get angry right back. Our culture even believes that if a person is depressed, it is unkind to be happy in their presence. Isn't that true? If you don't believe it, just wait till the next time your wife is depressed and have a ball in front of her. See what happens. One interesting thing is that she'll probably come out of the depression, but not into joy. The depression will turn to anger, which might be easier to heal. So, might be a good technique. But the point is, we have the belief that it is more appropriate to join the other person in their negative emotion than to invite them to join us in our positive emotion. And I don't know why we have beliefs that that's appropriate or that it works better. It doesn't work. You can prove that it doesn't work. In fact, you can take each of the negative emotions right down the line and check off what happens. What happens when you get angry? You get angry with other people because you want them to perform in a particular manner. You want them to do some particular thing or say some particular thing or act in some way that would be pleasing to you. And if they do not, then you use this thing that we call anger as a communication device to let that other person know you are not doing what I want you to do. Now, if that's a communication device to let our partner know that they're not doing what we want them to do, then it would be effective if that prompted them to immediately change what they're doing and do what we want them to do. Is that what happens? What actually happens is they get angry too. And then they'll be damned if they're going to do what you want them to do. Produces precisely the opposite result of what it is intended to do. Jealousy is another interesting one. We get jealous when we want somebody to notice us. You know, we attract people when we're attractive. And we want to be beautiful, attractive. We want to get people to give us their attention, their focus, and we get jealous in order to get that attention or focus. Now, a simple little question. Have you ever seen a jealous person who looked attractive? Isn't it absurd? We sabotage ourselves. We make ourselves ugly in order to get the attention of a partner we're in love with. This is called jealousy. It doesn't work. It's obnoxious. And it's destructive to relationships. And we are deciding beings. We are not victims of our emotion unless we decide to be. But if we feel victims, if we believe what has been communicated to us, and it's been communicated often enough, even by psychiatrists, psychologists, academics, teachers, we have been told emotions are something that happen to you. And you can't help it. It just happens. Other people do it too. They say things or do things that cause your emotions. And you can't help it. So the most appropriate thing to do is express it. Get it out. Don't repress it. That's dangerous. That's unhealthy. So give it expression. And in generations back, it was believed that that is the healthiest thing to do with emotion. It's really the only thing that you can do with emotion. But it isn't true. Emotions are not something that happen to you. Emotions are something that you do. They are goal-oriented activities based on a belief and a decision. You cannot have an emotion without deciding to. However, that decision is usually based on habit, meaning that you made a decision way back early in life, usually at about age 3 or 4. That's when your emotional habits are formed. Those emotional habits are formed by a 3-year-old to manipulate their world. And sometimes they work very well for 3-year-olds. But they are seldom altered after that. And so a decision that was made at age 3 becomes habit, and the habitual response is given, it's triggered without a conscious decision for the rest of your life. And then you say, it just happens, I can't help it. You can help it by taking the same responsibility that you took at age 3 of forming a response that seems appropriate to you at this time to a particular catalyst based on the effect that that response will produce. And you don't have to suppress or repress in order to do that. What you have to do is examine your beliefs. What do I believe about this situation? What do I believe about the appropriate response to that situation and what the result of my response will be? If it will work for me, by all means do it. Sometimes anger works. If you get precisely the result that you want, then do it. But don't say, you made me angry. It's not possible. No one has ever made you angry in your life. It's never happened to you. It's impossible. The only thing that another person can do is what they want to do or what they need to do. And if that isn't what you wanted them to do, you can be angry if you want to. But it's your decision. So instead of saying, you hurt my feelings, you made me angry, you made me jealous, reword your communication and admit to yourself, I did jealousy because I believed that that was the appropriate response to what you were doing. I did it. I decided to experience and express that emotion because I believe that it is an appropriate response, or because I felt helpless and didn't know what to do, and that's available. The first step in forming supportive relationships, working relationships, is taking personal responsibility. As long as you think like a victim, you are going to be victimized by life, by your marriage partner, by your children, by your job, by everything around you. The incidents and coincidences of life are going to be catalysts that will wash you one way or another, and even if you're happy, you're going to believe that it is because certain things are working in a certain way at this time. And you will find yourself incapable of being happy unless certain conditions are met. Unfortunately, those conditions that we may use as a criteria for happiness may be quite rare and quite fleeting. Most people, it appears, can only be happy for brief periods during which there is some form of entertainment. They have enough money, good health, good job, nice family, all of that. The interesting thing is that with all of those things that they think will make them happy, they only produce happiness for the briefest moment. You're very happy on the day that you get a raise. But a couple of weeks later, having lived with that raise for a few days, the happiness disappears and is replaced by the same insecurity that you had before you got the raise. And you are absolutely certain now in your new situation that the reason that you're unhappy is because you don't have enough money. You need another raise. And of course, if you get it, you'll be happy for a few moments. And then you'll return to normal. And normal for most people is a victim situation in which the situations of life, the conditions around me are dictating the way that I feel. If I believe that I am incapable of choosing the way that I will feel at any given moment, under any circumstances, then I am already defeated in living life effectively. A person who is not taking responsibility for choosing the way that he feels is a loser for himself, and worse, a very bad prospect for marriage. Don't get yourself married to a victim. But on the other hand, if you are a victim, don't inflict yourself upon someone who isn't. Then how do we take that first step toward changing that? The most important relationship in your life is your relationship with yourself, because all of the other relationships are built out of it, including your relationship with God. That's a fascinating one. You know, I grew up with religion. I grew up with religion being fed to me at least 3 times a day, 7 days a week, and usually more than that. I memorized large portions of the Bible before I was ever in my teens. And growing up with religion and this ever-present God, who of course disapproved of anything I enjoyed doing, but living with this presence of God caused me to believe that the most important relationship in life is my relationship with God. And I still believe that that one is vitally important. And I would even say that it is the single most important relationship in life, if it weren't for the one fact that it is dependent upon my relationship with myself in this way. If I believe myself to be guilty, inadequate, sinful, unworthy, I will worship a God who finds me guilty, sinful, inadequate, and unworthy. I have no choice. And God has no choice. Even if he isn't like that, I will perceive him in that way. In fact, the fact that I'm using the term him to refer to her is an infliction of our society. She doesn't have any choice except to be our father. See how it works? We create that relationship out of our relationship with ourselves. And if we have a good and wholesome and healthy and joyous relationship with ourselves, then we will be very thankful for a very loving source who approves, of course, of who and what I am. Of course he approves of me. I know that I'm all right. In fact, I might even realize that fact just through recognition that if he really is effective, he didn't make no trash. And for me to assume that he did is an insult. Am I obligated to begin my relationship with God, my worship of him, by insulting him into thinking that he did a rotten job of creating me? Am I obligated to feel guilty and sinful and unworthy, some rotten, hell-bound creature, miserable? Can I begin my relationship with him by accusing him of creating such a thing? Well, if that's my belief about myself, and if I believe that I must be unworthy in order to please him, then I have built this relationship with a very sadistic God who has a problem. Someone should recommend a therapist. We need to use the common sense that we have and our ability to listen. Because with the common sense that I have, that you have, to see the situations of life, there comes an ability to recognize, I hope, that that thing, whatever it is that we call common sense, my mind, comes from somewhere. And it's a pretty safe bet that the source of my mind is a greater mind. The source of my ability to think must be a greater ability to think in order to have produced such an incredible instrument as my mind. And if this greater mind is so wise, knowing more than I ever could, knowing enough to give me the ability to think, and if the source of my mind is also the source of my body, which is very safe bet, isn't it? Then it created ears, which means you can probably hear. Created lips, he almost certainly can communicate. He invented the idea of communication. And here's this great creative intelligence that gave me my mind, gave me my ability to hear and to speak. This creative intelligence is quite apparent, actually, if you stop to think that in this moment, while you and I are sharing, while you're sitting there, there is an intelligence that is smarter than you are. You'll have to admit it. Because that intelligence is right now regulating the relationship between your heartbeat and the rhythm of your lungs. And I bet you don't know how to do that. I bet if your life depended on it in this moment, you could establish the right relationship between those two. And even if you could, you would also still have to remember that cells in your body, living cells, are dying right now. And unless they are immediately replaced with new living cells that have the same capacity, capability to maintain your health, you're sitting there dying. And so while you are regulating your heartbeat with the rhythm of your lungs, you're going to have to remember to make brand new cells too, create them and give them life, breathe life into them. Fascinating thing, there is a creative, life-giving process going on in your body right now that is giving you an ability to think, an ability to manage the incredibly fascinating instrument that is your body. That intelligence is smarter than you are, knows more than you consciously know. To deny it is unwise. To admit it is a step in the right direction. But more than that, don't you think if there is such a brilliant intelligence as that is sitting there in the same seat with you, wouldn't it be smart to start a conversation? To be receptive to what that mind is thinking, to form a relationship, to be constantly and continuously aware of that intelligence, and to find out, explore, and see if you can communicate with it, form a friendly relationship. If that mind is so much more brilliant than your conscious mind, it's very likely that it has some things to tell you about yourself, what you're here for. Almost everybody that I've ever met has a feeling inside that there's something important about life, about my life in particular. I came here to do something. Almost everybody feels there's a reason for living. And I came here to do something in particular. If I could just remember what it was, then I could get about it and use my life effectively. And I think it's true. I think you came here to accomplish something specific, something that is specifically, individually yours to accomplish. And I think it is important. to recall or find out what is. And I'm reasonably sure that that creative intelligence that is sitting there with you knows the answer to that question, what you came here for. And probably knows who you should be with to best accomplish that mission. And how you should relate with that other person or persons. How the two of you together can best form the relationships, the habits, the practices that will be productive for your accomplishing your mission in life. Your effectiveness, your satisfaction, your peace, your fulfillment. If you will start a conversation with that source, there's a step, one step, but an important one. And when you establish that relationship with that source, there are a couple of things to be very careful of in forming that relationship. And one is that your relationship with yourself is healthy. If it isn't, to form that relationship with that intelligence inside you is actually dangerous. I think that's important for you to hear because I suspect that there are any number of people in this group here tonight who are curious and probably probing, delving, studying into psychic things. And that's fine. I admire curious people. Curiosity, the wanting to learn and to know, is vitally important. It's at the root of intelligence and effectiveness and productivity. But if it is coupled with a wrong relationship with yourself, it's dangerous. And so are all your other relationships. As a matter of fact, any person who does not have self-worth, self-appreciation, self-respect, self-love is a dangerous person for you to even have a relationship with. Hear that? That's one of the keys. One of the things that I came down here to tell you. It is dangerous to maintain a relationship with a person who is lacking in self-worth. And the reason I say it's dangerous is this. You and I apparently are born with a very particular, deep need. A vital need that must be met. We are aware, all of us, of at least 5 survival needs, perhaps more. We're aware of the need for sunlight, food, air, water, shelter. Those are commonly and universally recognized. But there's one more survival need that has only recently been recognized and only recently classified as a survival need. It happened because it was observed that babies who are born and live their early months and years in an institution tend to die of something that was called institutional illness. Institutional illness was a disease that was killing children, and the doctors, the nurses, the medical people couldn't figure out why, because they were getting all they needed. It didn't seem to be any biological organism or lack of sunlight, food, water, any of the 5 survival needs. They were all there. But the one thing they finally discovered that was missing was a particular person relating to that baby as an individual, caring for that child. They identified the 6th survival need as love. And according to that research, you and I have to have it, literally have to have it in order to survive. Without it, you'll die. Except we're clever people. And we have found out there are some substitutes. And it's really true. There are substitutes for this survival need. Now, there's something you should know about the substitutes. The substitutes are only temporarily effective. They are addictive. And we develop tolerances for them so that we always have to have increasingly more and more of them in order to compensate for that love that is missing. those substitute for that survival need are incredible. Now, the survival need itself is for love, but one of the substitutes is hate. Isn't that fascinating? You can survive by getting hate. You can't survive by getting indifference. But you can with hate, because that's an energy that recognizes that you exist. And that's the real criteria. Any energy that is directed toward you from another individual that recognizes your existence and recognizes the fact that you matter. You matter because you're causing a difference in their life. Any energy that is given to you that recognizes that you are effectively affecting someone else's life is a substitute for love. And we can survive on it. We can't thrive on it. And we get addicted to it. And we build tolerance for it so that we ever have to have more and more. Money is a substitute. Power is a substitute. Jealousy is a substitute. Envy. We will take any kind of an energy that makes a person recognize our existence and realize that we are an important factor in their life, and we will substitute it for love. Fascinating thing is, it happens in marriages every day. We use love substitutes when we feel that we are getting insufficient doses of the real thing. If you're not getting love from your partner, you're feeling unloved. What do? It may be that the first thing that you will do is try something really nice. You are hungry for love from the partner, and so you do something really kind to get them to notice and appreciate it. That's fairly appropriate. But I bet it's not the way you do it. What do you do when you want your partner to say, I love you? I bet I can tell you. I bet you fall silent. You just suddenly get quiet and there's this look in your eye. Sort of pathetic look, maybe it is. Or it might be a little hurt, or even a little angry. Interesting thing. The other partner comes walking into the room, and before they even see that you're silent, or see the look on your face, they walk into the room and they feel the energy in the room, right? Have you felt that? You walk into the room and there's this sort of heaviness already in the room, and then you notice, uh-oh, something's wrong. And then you start to think, what did I do? What did I say? And you start trying to figure it out. And then maybe, if you're brave, you say, is something wrong? No. Do you want to talk about it? No. And now, of course, with those two little snaps, you now have your feelings hurt, right? So you fall silent for a little bit. I can give it right back. I'll just be quiet too. Or maybe you do it another way. Maybe it's not because you're angry. Maybe it's because you don't know what to do. You say, better not say anything. You know, I don't want to cause any trouble. So you sit there wondering what's going on. The other one sits there thinking, why doesn't he say something? He doesn't care. It's really true. He doesn't love me. And then we get into this self-talk that takes us deeper and deeper and deeper into self-pity, anger, hurt. And pretty soon, we start throwing barbs at each other. And when we get finished with the fight, then sure enough, that other person says, I love you. So it worked. Right? Do you recognize that? No? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
No? Okay, some of you do. That's fairly common. A fairly common technique is this falling silent in order to start communication. Now, how sensible is that? That's one of those irrational things that we do. If we want to get love, we can probe for it, we can ask for it, we can do something to demonstrate love and see if love will be returned. And if nothing else, we can just simply say, I have this need, and I would like this need to be met. And if you can't, I would like to understand what the difficulty is. in meeting this need. But perhaps more than anything else, I should learn this one thing. I was born with a need. It is inherent, it is natural, it is normal. I should have this need. It is part of being whole as an individual, a need for love, a need for a communication that I matter, that I am all right. I have this need to be met. Now, the interesting thing about the need is that almost all human beings, at least 99% of all human beings, spend an entire lifetime trying to get that need met by others. The last two words, that's the mistake. Because it can't happen for a number of reasons. The first reason that I cannot get that need met by others, and if this is what you're looking for in marriage, I want to give you a warning in advance. It won't work. No matter how willing the other partner is to give you love, it won't work. It will not meet your survival need. It won't. It is not what marriage is for, and it should not be the basis for marriage. That probably contradicts everything you've been told about marriage. So I'll have to see if I can show you why I say that. Marriage should not be based on the need to meet that survival need, because another person cannot meet it for you. One of the reasons is that other person, all these other people around you tonight, all these other people are trying to get their survival need met too. There's an interesting thing happens when you meet a person. You're standing there wondering, what is he thinking about me? And you are choosing your words, your facial expression, your stance, in order to communicate a message, in order to get that person to think what you want them to think about you, and you're wondering the whole time whether it's working or not. You're watching the eyes and the face and the smile and the words to get the message to find out whether it's working or not. And you're looking carefully for this signal from that person. Yes, they do approve, they do accept, they are giving me love. And you know, of course, what's going through that other person's mind. They're watching your eyes, your face, the way that you are communicating to find out if you're meeting their need. So whatever you decide to think at the outcome, what really happened was two people were trying to get their survival need met by the other one. Now that is almost 100% of all communications. And the only exceptions are, there are a few people, very few, there are a few people on this planet who have discovered what I call the golden key. The golden key is the X factor in making relationships work. It's the X factor in health, in effectiveness, in life. It's the key to almost everything. That is, a few individuals have found out, yes, I do have that sixth survival need. I have to be loved. I have to be approved of. I have to get the message that it matters that I'm alive. But the only one, the only being in all of the universe who can give that to me effectively is me. Even if another person does give it, and it does not agree with my assessment of me, I will not be able to receive it. I can only receive it effectively from me. I must meet my criteria for being all right, worthwhile, loved, approved of. If I give myself that approval, that love, that all rightness that I need to survive, then, only then, I will be whole enough in my relationship with myself to form a whole and productive relationship with my source, and a whole and productive relationship with co-workers, with my boss, and with a marriage partner. And if I do not meet that need in myself to become whole, then I will go into a marriage with a hole in me that needs to be filled. And I will find ways to reach from that other person statements or indications of my all rightness. And if they are not getting the statements of all rightness that they need from me, they will return statements to me that say, you are definitely not all right, because you're not meeting my need. And so I'm needing to get the statement that I'm all right. I'm getting exactly the opposite statement from my marriage partner, and I may fill my whole marriage with that conflict, denying them all rightness because they're denying me all rightness, and trying to get statements back and forth that usually turn into barbs of hurt, hate, deterioration, which we pass on to our children. And we bring in another generation of people who believe that others have to meet my need for survival and all rightness, and they try desperately to be loved. It's pretty good bet that most of you, even today, grown, married, out on your own, probably with children of your own, most of you are probably still trying to get the love and approval of your parents, one or the other. Things that you do and say today and tomorrow will be done specifically to meet a demand that was put upon you by your father or by your mother, even if that parent is dead. You're still trying to meet their expectations and get their approval and receive their love. And you probably have a belief that if you can ever accomplish that, then you will feel good about yourself, successful and all right. And you'll have that need met. Until you discover that all rightness within yourself and give yourself the fulfillment of that survival need, you will seek it from outside yourself, and you will build inappropriate relationships. The first step in creating marriage is not looking for the right partner. It is, in fact, making sure that you are not going to be a victim in a relationship, no matter how effective the other person is. Whether that other person is good or bad is less than half of the criteria for whether your marriage will work. What your partner is, what your partner does, your partner's input into the marriage is less than half of whether that relationship is working. You and your input is more than half. Because you can make a relationship work by being whole within yourself and by discovering the lack of wholeness in the partner, meeting those needs, and both of you can become healed and you can build a good and beautiful relationship. First, deal with your relationship with yourself before you enter a love relationship with somebody else. Otherwise, you'll make a wrong choice of partner. And after making the wrong choice of partner, you will relate to that partner inappropriately. And you will make it much more difficult to discover your all rightness in yourself because you will be getting negative feedback about it and producing negative feedback to the other person. The first step in building good relationships, the first step in finding the right lover and forming a marriage relationship is to fall in love with you. To actually give yourself love and approval in abundance. Don't be scared of your ego. A person who is all right with himself is not better than, is not even compared with another. He doesn't need to be egotistical because he's fulfilled. Egotistical people are those who are not convinced of their all rightness. They are not people who have too much self-love. They are people who have too little and are trying to prove something by comparison. So don't be afraid of ego in learning to love yourself. And if you have been taught that Christianity says that you have to love others more than yourself, then you have misunderstood Christianity. It's not what Christ said. And it's not what Judaism taught him, which is what he said anyway. Do you ever stop to think of that? Here is this great mass people worshiping a Jewish rabbi and hating Jews. And believing, in fact, that he came along and founded a new religion. Ever occurred to you that he was never a Christian? He was Jew for his whole lifetime, worshipped in synagogues, and still practiced the Jewish religion when he died. Never suggested that we should do anything else. Wonderful Christian church we're in here, and that's all right. If following him means following what he said, then we will be good Jews anyway. What he said was, if you will learn to love yourself, God, and others. He mentioned all three in the same sentence. Love yourself, God, and others. And he did not say to love one of those more than the other. He said love others as yourself, not more than. And if you love yourself less than others, you are not loving others as yourself, are you? I must love myself as I love you. And if I love myself very little, I have no choice but to love you very little because I have very little to give. But if I love myself a lot, as a matter of fact, if I discover what I am, it's almost certain that I will love myself a lot. I mean, after all, consider what you are. I mean, the totality of what you are. I mean, your mentality, your mind, incredibly complex thing, fascinating, isn't it? And your body, you could study it for a lifetime and be fascinated and impressed. The sum of what you are is absolutely incredible. How could you not approve it? Recognize what it is. Give it a great deal of appreciation. Fulfill your need to be loved, approved, and all right. And then you will find that it's perfectly natural to give that same approval and all rightness to others around you. You don't have to make a contest. I'll love you if you'll love me. Instead of doing what almost everybody does. You know, when we start to form a relationship, we sort of hold something out very tentatively. I'm willing to love you if you'll love me. But if you give any indication that you don't love me, I'm not going to love you either. And we say that right up front. I'm afraid to give my love to you unless you're going to give yours back to me. I'm not going to love anybody who doesn't love me. I mean, how can I? Well, I can if I'm all right. If I have love, if I'm giving myself love, then I approach people in a new way. I approach even a stranger, people that I'm just meeting. I can approach with a knowledge, with a knowing. I'm going to love you. I do love you. I mean, it's something that I already know, because I know that you are interesting, fascinating, incredibly complex, a wonderful being. I know that. And of course, you do some awful things sometimes. And, you know, I'd be kidding myself if I said you don't, but you also do some wonderful things sometimes. And you are fascinating. And I can extend my love to you because I want to, because I want loved people in my life. I can give you my love, and if you don't love me, it's all right. It's just because you don't know me well enough. If you really know me, you will have confidence of that. I'm lovable. And besides that, if you don't love me, it's all right because I am loved. It's all right, I'm loved. I will survive, and I will be loved, and I'll feel good and all right about myself. I'm not going to be hurt that I'm rejected. For what? Why do I want to punish me? For your lack of recognition of my value. And why should I let your ability to judge my value cause me to doubt my value? You know, people live as victims, almost everybody. And if they find out that other people doubt their worth, it can put them in a whole tailspin of hurt, of fear, of insecurity. But it's a decision. Who is it that assesses your worth? Who is it that decides whether you're worthwhile or not? There's only one person who can, and that's fact. That's just plain, down-to-earth fact. There's only one person who can assess your worth and give it an assessment that you will believe. You're the only one. What is the criteria? Name it. It's your choice. You can make that criteria success if you want. But that's not a valid criteria. Being successful, the value of that is the value of your accomplishments, not the value of you. What are you worth? I have a criteria I would suggest. What is the value of God expressing himself? Take that and make that your value. It's what you are. An intricate, delicate, complex, fascinating, absolutely wonderful expression of God. Is what you are. That's not hard to love. It's natural to love anything as wonderful as that. That's more than acceptable. It's more than just all right. It's wonderful. Take that as a first step. Accept it, establish it, and remember it. If it takes you 500 times a day to remind yourself of that, plant it in your self-talk. Your self-talk will determine how you form relationships and whether you're successful or not. So I'm going to stop there for a moment and let you have a break so we can come back and talk about self-talk as a technique for changing your relationship with yourself and for forming relationships with others.